There we go. Good morning. Thank you for listening to WXOX 97.1 FM in Louisville, Kentucky. This is Artist Talk with LVA and is produced by Louisville Visual Art, and I am your host, Keith Waits. With me today, Matt Weir is a contemporary sculptor and artist known for his monumental works in stone, bronze, and mixed media. He graduated cum laude with a BFA from the University of Louisville Height Art Institute with minors in humanities and art history in 2004. Throughout his time in school, he was busily apprenticing with a diverse set of professional artist studios and a bronze art foundry. Matt's time associated with Bright Foundry lasted for approximately 15 years. In 2016, Bright Foundry closed permanently, and he co-organized a team to succeed it as Falls Art Foundry, located in the Portland neighborhood, as an essential resource to support the legacy of sculptural materials, methods, and education. And so we're here to talk about this with Matt today because Matt and Falls Art Foundry will be a part of Open Studio Louisville on October 15th and October 22nd. Matt, how you doing?
Good. I'm doing well. Good morning. Thanks for having me, Keith. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here with you.
Well, thanks for coming back. You've been on the show before. It's been a little bit of time, though, I think, back in the studio before we had to go to pre-recording because of pandemic. So Falls Art Foundry, you're a neighbor of ours in Portland. It's exciting because we're both our buildings are undergoing renovations right now, and but you're a part of Open Studio this year. We're so happy about that. On both the 15th and the 22nd.
It's just the 15th.
Just the 15th. Just the 15th. Okay, yep. Thank you. There's a lot of them. There's like 88 people, so it's hard to keep track in my brain.
Oh, I know it. I wish we could do both. Heather's playing up. Heather Summers, my partner, is playing up at New York Folk Festival on the 22nd, and I was just, and Scott has to be somewhere also, and so we really wanted to do both.
That's a good reason to miss it.
It's a good reason, I know, and I just haven't been able to do anything like away and fun for some time, and so it's just like I'm going to New York City to the folk festival, and that's that.
Sure. And Heather, we had the great pleasure of having Heather on the show. Was it early summer? I guess, I don't know. She was involved with a theater production called Infertility, and she sang for us.
Yeah. She's
right. Quite wonderful. But we're not here to talk about Heather. We could do a whole other show about her sometime. Right. So Falls Art Foundry, just to get a little bit of the history, to reiterate the history. So you worked with Bright Foundry. Now that was the Barney Bright Foundry. And after Barney died, his son ran that, kept it operating for a certain period of time. But then when he decided to close it down, he turned to you guys, because I think Falls Art Foundry is you and tell me the partner's name. Scott Boyer, and we started it with Tamina Karam as well, but she's since parted ways to just kind of focus on her own work, and it was all very good, partying and everything. But so now it's just Scott and myself at the moment. But all three of you had worked at Bright Foundry.
Yeah, all three of us worked at Bright Foundry, overlapping. Scott was really the veteran. He'd been there for 25 years or something like that. Yeah, I started working with Barney back on Frankfurt Avenue, and then transitioned from. So Barney set up the foundry on Frankfurt Avenue, where there's a building next to Osaka, where Osaka's still there, next to where Nancy's Bagel used to be, kind of, and. There's a great video I watched not too long ago on KET about Barney, and it shows his studio and all of that, and I just love that stuff. And so Barney started the foundry mid-70s. I don't know if this is the question you asked me or the answer you want, but he got kind of overwhelmed with making other artists work. When he really just wanted to be producing his own work, but he's got the furnace, he's melting and casting metal. Other people needed the service as well, and so he said to his son Jepitha, who we called Jep, and he said, you do this, you take over casting all of these other artists' work, and you'll cast my work as well. So it all worked out. So Jep ran the foundry, which was located, as I like to say, on the wet side of the flood wall very lower Frankfurt Avenue. It's like 1621 East Washington Street. It shared the driveway of the Louisville impound lot. So it's kind of tucked away in a dark corner. Very much not like, a place you would drop in at, because it's so hard to find to begin with. So Jep did that from, I think, late 1987 until 2016, when he was just ready to be done with it. I had put in, approximately 15 years, give or take, kind of helping out with projects, and then, retreating to work on my own projects. Scott was, originally worked with Barney and then transitioned all through Jep's period. And then Tamina had put in like 6 or 7 years as well. And so we had a good like 40, plus years of kind of experience together with a lost wax ceramic shell, bronze casting. And
but Jep turned to you guys. He didn't just sort of like put it out in the market. He really wanted you guys to take it over, right?
No, we really kind of had to. I mean, it's not that he didn't want us to take it over, but it was, he was really just ready to kind of put it down and walk away. He wanted to sell the property, which we could not afford. And so that was kind of the sticking point for us. It's like, we were just like, artists with artist dollars. We were just like, well, that's real estate. We can't touch that. And artist bank loan issues, that kind of stuff. They're just like, no, probably not. But we could put together the money to buy all of the equipment. And that would leave, Jep the, opportunity to sell the property, which he did. There was pluses and minuses with that, in both respects, because the foundry had been set up and was a working foundry, had been since like the late 80s. Mm-hmm. What we were entering into is buying all of that equipment and starting over with that equipment in a place that was not a foundry. It was not supported with, overhead bridge cranes and, gas line plumbing for a large furnace, and melting and casting hundreds of pounds of 2000 degree molten metal. Most places aren't ready to go for that kind of
it's a very specific sort of need.
Yeah, absolutely. But it was what we did. So we bought all the equipment, the furnace and just everything we could peel out of that building, and got a hold of Gil Holland. And he was aware of a building down on Portland Avenue, which is still where we are, 1715 Portland Avenue, right in the middle of Portland Avenue on the expressway side. And it's been a good building for us, but it's definitely been difficult because of those kind of transitional obstacles. Like I said, it was not a foundry, and there. Some parts of the foundry can, weather well, the hot and cold transitions of the seasons, but other parts cannot, because we're dealing with wax. The blood of the foundry is wax, and wax responds, in all conditions, too hot and cold. If it's warm, it expands. If it's cold, it contracts and becomes really brittle. And that wax is a sculpture. And so if it's, heating, contracting and expanding, that can jeopardize different aspects of the process, that I can drone on about and for more than your audience wants to hear at this moment.
But so you've been there functioning, you say, so I mean, like I think it took a little time, but what you were functioning in, like doing work there, what, in 16, 17? When did you start?
16. Yeah, I think it was late in 2016.
So you've been there for a while doing this, but I remember visiting you in that first year or two, and you were talking about changes to the building you envisioned. That there
Yeah,
were, and it does. There's a little bit of ground around you, and so you have the opportunity to expand the physical building a little bit, or whatever you need to do, and so you're
right.
doing that now. So
Yeah,
we'll come on Open Studio Weekend, Open Studio Louisville on the 15th, which is 11 to 6 on the 15th. And by the way, we'll stop for a second and say, like, you can find out everything you need to know by going to louisvillevisualart.org, and you can download the app showing you all the artists' locations. There's 2 Saturdays, the 15th and the 22nd. Falls Art Foundry is available on the 15th only, so circle that date. So when people come, they're going to see you guys in the middle of this in some growth. They're going to see you expanding and making changes in the building, which can only happen because you've been successful, right?
yes. Ultimately, I mean, it's, our success and the generosity of, art patrons here in Louisville that, have come to realize that, have come to realize what we knew all along. I mean, why we, well, I'll just speak for myself, like why I personally felt that the Foundry was too important of a thing to go away, was because it, has been nurturing, supporting, educating artists for, the last 50 years here in Louisville and the region. Ed Hamilton, is,
I was just saying.
yeah, star sculptor, obvious person to point at, who tells this great story. Keith, you've probably heard it a handful of times. I know I have, about how he was, parked outside of Barney Bright's studio while he was teaching classes. Ed was teaching high school classes or something like that. And he was, like sitting in the car and kind of kept going back and forth, like, should I go knock on the door or not? And I think he had determined that he was not going to, and he was going to pull away. And at that moment, Barney opened the door to check his mail, and Ed was just like, well, I'm getting out. Here we go. It's on. And that was essentially, I mean, some could say the beginning of Ed's sculpture career, at least the one that we know.
Right.
Of Ed being this, recognized bronze sculptor.
Right. He had done a lot of 2D work, and he'd done some 3D work,
Yeah.
but a very limited scale, and not working in bronze.
Right. Right.
He knew he wanted to take that step, and so there's this guy named Barney Bright in town.
Yeah.
That's the first thing you do, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And so, really just kind of like symbolically to me, it's just, there's so much kind of heart and soul behind the Foundry, and just, what the Foundry represents, which is what Ed tapped into,
Yeah.
which is what we want to continue to support. We want to continue to support that opportunity for, artists of all ages to, meet and work with someone in the field of their interest. And it doesn't have to be bronze. To me, the Foundry really represents, kind of this nexus of sculpture, tools and materials and conversation, as it did for me when, I was a younger person. I fortunately really recognized quite early what I wanted to do. So, and was supported in high school doing that. But I went to UK for 1 year, but before I left for that year, I befriended Mike Ratterman of Ratterman Funeral Home, and also an accomplished sculptor and artist, and Raymond Graff. And Mike especially kind of showed me around. He had apprenticed with Craig Caviar and Paul Fields, and Mike had also done some time at Bright Foundry. So I got to understand what those places were, not so much meet everybody or enter them. Went to UK, spent my freshman year there carving stone out behind Jack Grawn's office, He was the dean of the sculpture department there, and left and came back after that 1 year because I really wanted to explore those opportunities that I knew were here in Louisville. And so I did just that. Even though U of L did not really have a sculpture department. The sculpture professor, Amy Wangbo, had just left. There was not a single sculpture major. I entered as a sculpture major. Peter Bodner, the painter, was, kind of taking care of the sculpture department, and we were doing some things, and then they hired Scott Massey. But all that time, I got a job with Craig Caviar and was working with him, and I really did that, to start working with Paul Fields, the stone sculptor, through Paul Fields and his relationship with the foundry, because Paul was Barney Bright's first apprentice, and I was Paul's last apprentice before he passed away. Through Paul, I got to meet the foundry and, all the people working through there. And, Paul, he did bronze casting, but he was mostly a stone carver and a wood carver, right, and worked in different, cast material. But again, that's just kind of going back to the idea of the foundry just being this watering hole for sculptors, and these, sculptural conversations, and talking about, Paul had this block of stone when I first started working with him that was the size of a minivan parked outside of his studio. And that is now the stone sculpture of Paul's, just as you enter Bernheim Arboretum over on the right-hand side by Lake Nevin. Looks like a big lotus flower, like a big 4-petaled lotus flower. And so I got to help Paul carve that, and, just opportunities like that through that sculptural conversation that I feel like the foundry is kind of a bit of the heart of, is the core of what we want to sustain, and why the foundry was so important to not let disappear.
Cool. Right. Well, before we run out of time, I want to talk a little bit about what you're doing on the 15th, because you're not just open for people to come visit the building, which in and of itself is a worthwhile thing to do. But you guys are planning to do a pour, is it a bronze pour?
Yeah, it'll be a bronze pour.
Yeah, so somewhat later in the day, you're thinking. It's hard to know exactly what time, but probably sort of the end of the time period that day, you're going to be doing a bronze pour, so people can come and actually watch you go through this process.
Yeah. The overall kind of pour experience lasts about an hour and 15 minutes or so, which begins with lighting the furnace. Takes around 50 or so minutes to get to a full pot of metal. I don't know what we'll be pouring at that time, probably various artists' work, as it typically is the case. We will be pouring about 2,000 degrees of metal, however many hundreds of pounds, really kind of depends on what's there. And we'll be shooting to do this as kind of like I guess, really a celebration of the first day. And we can do it at the end of the day, and afterwards everyone can go out to dinner and have fun and enjoy the rest of it, and be looking forward to the 22nd, the next weekend.
Well, and just to emphasize, so you said 2,000 degrees. I mean, so this is not a dangerous thing to come witness, and you take whatever sorts of precautions are, which is basically probably just like to stand a certain distance away for the general public.
There is really no concern of people coming and watching this. People do it all the time, and love it. And, everyone is filming, and it's just a really fantastic kind of primordial experience of just seeing this molten metal flowing, and there's the heat of the room and then the glow of the metal. It's a really fantastic thing if you've never seen any sort of metal pour, but it's, we'll take all precautions necessary. And there probably, I could see us running into, some sort of occupancy concern, but I think that, we've got plenty of space there, so it should be just fine. And, all are welcome.
Cool. Have you ever had a public audience for a pour there yet?
We have, it's mostly just very casual though,
Yeah.
to like, we happen to be pouring and so yesterday we poured and I was out at an opening for our friend Elsa Oldham at the Cressman Center
Right.
for the quilting show or the embroidery show, and met this nice couple, and we started talking, and I was like, oh well, I believe we're pouring tomorrow. You should get a hold of us. And so we exchanged text, and they showed up and saw it, and they were like, that was awesome. That was amazing. So typically it's pretty casual, but in the future, with all of this renovation work that we're doing, we will try. Well, what we're going to be able to do is like have an audience in, do tours, have classes, and we're really looking forward to working with LVA to like balance out some programming, things like that. As you said, we've got this yard around the foundry, and we're looking to reinstall this 100-year-old bridge crane that was just removed last weekend from a monument company. A 7-year conversation that I personally have been working on and I'm really excited about. And that bridge crane will support an outdoor sculpture and stone carving studio, concert space, workshops, and all of that good stuff in the future. So it really is an exciting point in the foundry's kind of arc. And we're really looking forward to welcoming everyone down and getting them accustomed to who we are, what we do, and why it's such a valuable part of Louisville's art fabric.
What I love about your whole story is that it's and you guys are definitely thinking you're playing a long game. You're thinking about the future. We talk about a 7-year conversation to obtain this bridge crane, which we could probably spend 20 minutes talking about how cool a bridge crane is. But anyway,
I would love to.
but that you're part of a continuum. When you talk about making the decision to come to Louisville and connecting, and that Falls Foundry is just the continuation of all of this continuum and this tradition that dates back my lifetime.
Oh, absolutely.
That's it's great. It seems like the legacy of this foundry has fallen into the right hands, I guess is one way to say it.
I'm certain that it has, because I'm just like, well, we're all just very excited about it. And it's just so deserving of that. I hope so. And I think so. I was kind of writing for someone to share information about the foundry. And do you have a minute if I just kind of read this real quick?
You got 1 minute.
So yeah, 1 minute. It says it's about putting things into perspective. And it says, making objects is directly equivalent to forming culture. Since the beginning of human culture and our ancestors' fashioning of wood, stone, and metal objects, people have been communicating and identifying with sculpture. Over 6,500 years ago, our earliest artist engineers cast metal using the same technique Falls Art Foundry uses every single day. 6,500 years ago. The foundry does this in order to produce works of equal quality and materiality to the sculpture works that we are still unearthing since those ancient days, while ensuring that the very same cooperative, hands-on traditions continue to thrive. So it's just, the long game is just, it's an ancient process that we use 6,500 years ago was, kind of devised. And that's, the source of the sculptures that were produced in Greece, Rome, Africa, Egypt, all across the globe. That's what we're doing. We're continuing this really ancient tradition, and kind of fulfilling it through bringing more people into that educational understanding. It's, to me, so much of it is, at least partially a matter of confidence, like giving people an understanding of, working with their hands and tools, and kind of this appreciation and respect for materials, and how you too can change a stone or a piece of wood or fashion metal. I just feel like that experience and that capability, or just like confidence through this practice, is such a valuable thing. And especially for, our young artists and students.
Okay, well, I've got to wrap it up there, but I think that's a good note to end on. I think it's a
Yeah.
good note to end on. So Matt Weir of Falls Art Foundry, who is participating in the Open Studio Louisville on October 15th from Louisville Visual Art and University of Louisville, Alan R. Height Institute of Art. And thank you for being with me today, Matt.
Thank you, Keith. Always a pleasure.
Yeah, it won't be the last time either.
Good.